Previously, Gabamara gets betrayed by the chief of his shinobi village because he wanted to leave with his wife. This leads to his capture and sentencing to death. They try numerous ways to execute him, but none of them work. All the while, Sajiri documents Gabamara's life and fearsome reputation of being a heartless assassin. We later learn that she is a very skilled executioner, and after the two fight, she reveals that he can get a pardon by the shogun if he travels to a mysterious island along with other criminals to compete to find an immortality-granting elixir of life. He promises to retrieve it to win the only pardon so that he can return to his wife. The story continues when Gabamara recalls the village chief performing an exercise to demonstrate his immortality. Members of the shinobi clan attacked him with numerous weapons, giving him fatal injuries, but the guy just stood there with a sinister grin. According to sources, it was due to some medicine he acquired long ago from a land across the sea, similar to where they have landed. Gabamara notices Sajiri's expression and comments saying that he feels like she does not believe that the elixir exists, but he assures her that it is real. However, he's not sure if it's on this particular island. The shinobi is still bound as they walk through the densely vegetated area. While surveying the environment, Sajiri comments on how fantastical everything is. This is to such an extent that it makes her believe that the elixir of life might be found there. Gabamara pauses and has the opposite take on the place. He calls it creepy and explains that there is no rhythm or reason to the species. From his observation, the habitat of the plants that are growing there are unnatural. A vision of the solo survivor flashes across his mind as he states that they also don't know what dangers might lie ahead. He warns her to be careful as he breaks his bondage. She immediately informs him that he's not allowed to remove them. Gabamara turns around shocked that she expects him to complete this already impossible task with his hands tied. She doesn't care for his opinion because it is what the shogun instructed. Her job is to keep an eye on him, so she will not allow any breach of the rules. She provides him with a fresh rope for him to bind his own hands. He tries to reason with her, but she's more by the book than Mr. Mosby from The Sweet Life of Zack and Cody. He starts to point out how much the odds are stacked against them. He states that they're only given 3 days worth of food and water, plus the only clue they have been given about this whole thing is this random drawing of what looks like a moldy orange. The shinobi is starting to doubt if the shogun wants to find the elixir. Sajiri has had enough of his yapping, so she quickly draws her sword towards his neck before telling him to bind his hands. She explains that she is his executioner, not his ally, so she doesn't care about his challenges. The lady informs him that if he refuses her orders, she will simply take his head. Gabamara sighs before following the instruction. As she ties his hands, he reminds himself that he's doing this to see his wife again, so he's willing to accept whatever conditions. Suddenly, a giant flail hits Gabamara in the face, which sends him flying, much to Sajiri's shock. The attack came from Kayan. As he retracts his iron ball, he insults the shinobi for letting his guard down, thinking that he's taken one competitor out. The guy is surprised to see that Gabamara is still alive after taking that hit. Sajiri does a wellness check, and he reports that it was only his neck that got dislocated. Gabamara draws her attention to his attacker's state, but she misinterprets and begins to give exposition about the guy. He's a warrior monk who became obsessed with weapons during his training. This led him to hunt down hundreds of warriors to steal their weapons after ending them. Gabamara lets her know that he was pointing out the fact that his hands aren't bound. This gets her stumped a little. She decides to ask her senior why his prisoner is not bound. Kisho comments on her rigidness, simply explaining that they can tie their hands on the trip back. He couldn't be bothered arguing with his prisoner about it. Gabamara gets in her face to point out the fair point. Kisho begins to state that she's the lowest ranked executioner because she's honest to a fault. Sajiri cuts him off before he can expand on his point. The mad monk slams his weapon down, annoyed that Gabamara hasn't acknowledged him. He bangs down his box of many weapons, excited to try them on the unkillable shinobi. Gabamara sheds light on the fact that it would be pointless for them to fight as it will give a head start to the others, but Kayan details that since they have no leads, it would be best to finish off the other criminals so that one can take their time to search for the elixir. The shinobi just happens to be the first on his list. The executioners stand by to watch the outcome of the fight. Gabamara is annoyed that he has to end someone again since his wife doesn't like him doing that. However, he makes a cold face ready to do the job. As Kayan dashes towards him, Sajiri taps the shinobi's shoulder, still wanting him to bind his hands. While he restricts himself, the first attack lands clean, but the weapon shatters on impact. The mad monk immediately goes in with another weapon, but that breaks too, but Gabamara still stands strong. He comes in with the ball and chain again, but it shatters. He finally dashes in with a spear thrust, and by this time, the shinobi has finished tying himself. He traps the attack and uses the pole part of the spear as a lever to send Kayan flying into the air. His weapons rain down as he falls back to earth. Gabamara kicks one of the spears, which hits the monk, sending him crashing. The shinobi complains about how hard it is to fight with his hands tied. Sajiri is shocked that he ended things in one blow, but everyone is surprised when Kayan gets up laughing as it is revealed that his armor is sewn directly on his skin. His mask is also off at this point, showing his hideousness. The monk alerts him that he's only getting started. Things fade to black like a commercial break while Kayan gets off-screened, but we return promptly to human residue falling on some petals. The full extent of Gabamara's handiwork can be seen as things pan up. The monk suspends in the air, held by his weapons, as they pierce his body, making him look like a porcupine. The shinobi stands there still bound without a single scratch on him. The contrast between the two shows that it was just a mauling. He comments on how much of a waste of time that interaction was. He walks towards Sajiri, suggesting they start looking for the elixir and make up their lost time. She turns to him in disbelief, but he shows his hands, stating that they are still tied. Kisho gets Gabamara's attention when he draws his sword, but he proceeds to take the head of his prisoner as proof of his demise. He bids them farewell as he goes back to the ship. The shinobi was expecting a fight, but Kisho reminds him that they are neither enemies nor ally. He is just doing his job to bring their criminal head back. Sajiri reminds him that 60 men went missing on the island, so he should be careful on his way back. Her senior doesn't think she can afford to worry about others. He considers himself lucky that he gets out early. Kisho comments that she's naive if she thinks she's safe just because Gabamaru is tied. He reveals that moments after everyone headed to the shore, so many things have happened. Some have formed alliances, others have tried to seduce their executioners, and some have already started killing. This is shown when Aizen is ended by his giant prisoner who was hungry. Back inside the forest, Kisho offers to take out Gabamaru for Sajiri so that she can be free, but the ninja is at his side in a flash and holds his sword before he can draw it. He warns him to stop joking around before leaving. Kisho predicts that the situation will change in a few hours, as more than half the criminals will die, and in less than a day, there will be only one left. Some of the criminals are already shown meeting their demise. He reveals that they are expendable, so if they die, more will be added. This comment catches Gabamaru's attention, and Kisho discloses that the shogunate has contacted Gabamaru's clan. He also informs Sajiri that there are rumors that the performance of people on this job will determine the next head of their clan, so she should keep that in mind when interacting with the other executioners. He leaves with the warning that she shouldn't let her guard down around criminals. She looks at Gabamaru and reminds herself that he's dangerous despite the fact that they have traveled without incident for the last several days. The lady still doesn't understand his true character yet. She comes back to a moment after being lost in her thoughts, only to find Gabamaru launching an attack against her. She barely manages to block in time and questions him on what he's doing. With a cold look in his eyes, he confesses that he was hoping to end her painlessly. As Sajiri stares him in the eyes, she thinks that she has figured out his true nature. All the while, Gabamaru thinks back to the day his parents were ended for wanting to leave the village. The chief told him that emotion makes a person weak. Unless one is strong, one can't protect anything, let alone precious things. With that in mind, he clashes with Sajiri. She tells him that it is a violation of the rules to attack her. Gabamaru reveals that in this situation, everything is about priority, and with the chance of his clansmen arriving on the island, he has to retrieve the elixir before they land. Otherwise, everything will go up in smoke. He has no hate for Sajiri, but she's going to be a hindrance if she's to tag along at his pace. He continues his assault, and Sajiri sees his reasoning and morality as extreme and abnormal. So she believes that the ninja should be executed immediately, but for some reason she is hesitant. Unbeknownst to her, Gabamaru also suffers from the same problem. He knows he should have killed her by now, but he too is hesitating. The guy doesn't understand why. He thinks back to an interaction with his wife who made him know that it is normal not to want to kill anyone, and pointed out that his heart was beginning to change for the better. He lost that ruthlessness a little, which affected him in his mission, making him experience weakness. Things flash back to the current fight, and he fails to take the finishing blow when the opportunity comes. He notes it as that weakness again, knowing that it will not help him survive this ordeal. They continue to clash. He thinks back to the chief's words, which helps him become cold again. He snaps Sajiri's blade and comes down with a decisive blow, but she blocks with her scabbard. He confesses that he doesn't care about the other criminals, but ending her will hurt him, so he would like her to just allow him to finish her off quietly. Sajiri is skeptical that he still has those kinds of emotions. He agrees with her skepticism and quickly finds himself with the upper hand, but he struggles to finish her. The dark apparition of the chief egging him on to be ruthless vanishes away as his wife's loving demeanor covers his body. With a look of great pain on his face, he acknowledges that he does feel something. Sajiri knew deep down that Gabimaru was only a product of his environment, which is why she hesitated to attack. She could sense a tormented soul just like hers, but he endured and tried to hide his emotion. Gabimaru begins to cry as he calls himself weak for not being able to finish Sajiri. She sheathes the sword as she informs him that it's not weakness, but rather the seed of strength. She compares feeling nothing to one averting their gaze and believes that not fleeing from emotions is where real strength lies. She knows this because he was the one who indirectly taught her to face her demons. As Sajiri gets up, she tells him that she will overlook his wrongdoings. She challenges him to face his crimes and emotions to reclaim his life. Although their relationship hasn't changed, he's not his old self anymore. Elsewhere, Fuchi and Tamiya are surprised to see man-made statues on the island. As they look in awe and confusion, Tamiya is stung by one of the butterflies. Upon closer inspection of the creature, he realizes that it has a human face, and a vision of the flower survivor flashes into his head. The swordsman cuts his hand without hesitation and destroys the creature. This confuses Fuchi, so he points out that the butterfly has a human face, so it's not from their world. Shortly after, his amputated hand begins to grow flowers. Other creatures begin to come out, including a giant one with hands for eyes. During that interval, Gabimaru and Sajiri are also surrounded, but they are faced with a fish-head creature. The ninja asks her to stay back as he puts on his face mask ready to engage it. That brings the episode to an end.